The interbank mechanism of the BRICS Summit is an important part of the entire BRICS cooperation movement. While the political and the economic issues have their ups and downs, bankers put their head down and think of cooperation, contracts, and commerce. So I would like to think that the interbank mechanism, the interbank cooperation that the BRICS has set up is perhaps one of its most enduring contribution. And today I have with me people who are spearheading that cooperation. I have with me Mr. Philip Moleketi, who is the chairman of the Development Bank of Southern Africa. I have with me Mr. Ricardo Luis Ramos, who is the chairman of the BNDES, that is the Development Bank of Brazil. And I have with me Mr. Gorkov, Sergei Gorkov, who heads the Nesh Econom Bank, or the VEB, that's the Development Bank of Russia. So quite clearly the most important people in this interbank economic cooperation. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. Well, let me start with you, Mr. Gorkov. Well, we have seen a lot of instability in the global, especially emerging market and commodity producers in 2015. But 2016 has been a much better year for emerging markets and for the emerging economies. Are you getting a sense that the worst is over and that the emerging economy is on a slightly firmer path?
I think it's very difficult to explain now about the future, especially for economy. Because if you see if you think it will be better next year, it's become more worse. Yeah, and it sometimes depends on many factors. But I hope the next year will be a little bit better for developing countries, and especially for Russian markets. So expect economic growth about 1%. Of course, it's not very huge growth if you compare with Indian growth or Chinese growth. But for Russia and Brazil, it's not bad, and especially for European countries as well. And of course, economy now is in quite difficult situation, especially because oil prices it's very low. Probably it's good for Indian economy or for Chinese economy or European economy, but it's not very good example for us and for Brazil as well. But in this case, we expect this price of oil quite stable for economy, and $50 per barrels. It's very, quite balanced for any economy, for our economy and for
the producers and the
for producers and for another economy. In this case, we need to understand is not. Sometimes we're talking some difficulties, but I think it's not difficulties. It's normal life now. We understand it's normal life.
Yeah.
And we must
of course, it is normal life. I was in Russia last year, and although the papers were talking about trouble, it was business as usual, and in fact, it was lovely. So I would assume that business as usual. In fact, business should have been even better in 2016 compared to 2015. But let me come to you, Mr. Ramos. Your name includes a D'Souza. Did you find any relatives in Goa?
I don't know if I have parents here.
Okay, well, that was on a lighter note because we have a lot of relationship with the Portuguese names in Goa itself. But this interbank mechanism and the meetings that you have had so far in India, what can you say was a concrete achievement this year itself?
For me, it's the first time that I come to the BRICS meeting, and I'm very impressed because we are talking about, in my point of view, we are talking about the future, cooperation, social inclusive development, learning from experience. In fact, we don't talk about too much economy, but we talk about knowledge. That's because of this, I think that we are talking about the future. And all the countries and now the new development bank, we are put efforts together in the build a better economy. And in terms of crisis, Brazil is we have a big crisis, a perfect thunderstorm, political economy.
But you have turned the thunderstorm
we are turning
behind you.
Yeah, we are turning around, and it's interesting because in this moment, developed banks are more important because we have to take the risk, we have to to work hard in order to push the country to outside the crisis.
Well, you know, the people who coined the word BRICS, Goldman Sachs, we interviewed them yesterday, and they believe Brazil is today in the same turnaround story that India was in 2014, and at that time we saw a lot of improvement in the economy. So
we are very optimistic in the near future.
Yes.
Let's see, because the economy we never know.
Oh, I agree with you. I mean, and thunderstorms can come actually from the developed economies, as we learned recently. Mr. Moleketi, I wanted to know that one of the things that the BRICS Summit is trying to speak about is the new ratings agency. How are you approaching? Is this something, as a banker, a ratings agency is very important to you. Is that an idea that South Africa favors?
You know what, one of the things, just to pick on the remarks of my colleagues, is that we're in an environment that to a large extent is characterized by both the commodity and currency fluctuations.
Yes.
You know, and some of the currency fluctuations and commodity price fluctuations are not something that are generated or initiated by the emerging economies. Something that I think the markets internationally imposes on some of our economies.
Yes.
I think that's one thing. And now the relevance of that is that it is important for an institution and an entity that understands the special circumstances that the developing or emerging economies find themselves in. And that, I think, it's one of the things that begins to put credence on the idea of a rating agency with specific understanding and depth of knowledge of our economies, the emerging economies. And I think that is one of the big arguments. The second aspect of it is that also, you know, in a number of instances, some of the macroeconomic challenges and changes, be it the fiscal deficits of the emerging countries and all that, you know, it's very difficult for someone who does not understand the depth, you know, and also the long-term trajectory of a number of economic indicators to make a judgment. An annual judgment. Sometimes it's like a quarterly judgment on just one indicator, you know. So we say this new institution will begin to understand what goes into, be it the fiscal policies or the monetary policies of emerging economies, taking on board some of the global challenges.
But could this interbank meeting and the larger BRICS meeting give you that understanding that you all could have coordinated fiscal policies or coordinated trade policies? Did you see any step towards that kind of cooperation?
There are a number of forums, just besides ourselves, that to a large extent the G20 being one of them, in terms of trying to coordinate the efforts of the developing, the developed, and say the emerging economies. And hence the rating agency that speaks to our special circumstance is quite important, you know, to mitigate and also to balance the views of the existing rating agencies. So the coordination is quite critical.
Oh, that's very good to hear if we can have a counterweight. Would you agree, Mr. Ramos, that a rating agency which is of the BRICS nations may be a counterweight to the prevailing opinion?
Yes, I agree. I think that when we are talking about knowledge, I think that we can offer to the financial markets a different kind of development and a different kind of let me see, a different kind of point of view, developed point of view. And because the emerging markets, we have sometimes it's very difficult to us to follow the pattern that the rating agents have. And maybe the best way to face this challenge is to improve the knowledge about our economies. And the BRICS, the cooperation agreement is a big.
So that's two things that you expect the BRICS rating agency can bring: better knowledge and also an alternative point of view.
Alternative point of view. Because the developed countries have to understand some specific difficult and opportunities that the emerging countries.
Your view, and also, do you think it will be internationally accepted? Because a rating agency would normally appeal to investors beyond only these 6 countries. So will the outside countries accept a BRICS rating?
I hope so, because you know, the BRICS economy is more than 30% of world economy. It's not small world. And in terms of economy, in terms of population, it's a half. You know, it's a huge part of the world. You know, in this case, I think it's an important step. And now, not just in our cooperation, it's an important step for the whole world, because it shows for the world the country, for developing country, can cooperate. And they need to have some institutions, like, for example, rating agencies as well.